Hi everyone, I'm Michael and we're going to start by talking about the motivation behind our app towards millennials and Gen Z. We thought modern problems require a modern solution. So if millennials and Gen Z are always on their phones, why not make an app for it? Everyone needs a safe space, especially during a global pandemic. I know I do. And children's emotions rate the most easily, so that's why they are our main target demographic. We also wanted to be inclusive to children with special needs so that they can also use our app as well. 1 in 5 adults in the US have some form of a mental illness, and this is to help solve their mental illness. Kids being taught to form healthy emotional habits early on will let them make better emotional decisions when they're adults by using our app, and that is the motivation behind our app. Thank you. Now we can talk about the requirements of the app. The UI, because our main demographic are children, needs to be simplistic and also fun, because if the app is not fun, then who's going to be using it? So we do this by appealing to both visual and auditory learners, and we do this in addition by using things like color coordination. Tutors for kids with special needs are where we got some of this research from, and then we also researched on our own ways to make the app more fun. Simple games for exercises we then incorporated into the app, such as building blocks and dressing up Oba-Bear. Who doesn't want to dress up Oba-Bear? And the most popular out of all these was the painting game, where users could exercise their own creativity and also calm themselves down and improve their emotional state. This was by far the most popular out of all the games, and we hope to find more games like this in the future. Thank you.
For the design of our app, we wanted our users to feel comfortable, safe, and included while still having fun. During our process, we took into account the needs and the interests of our target audience in order to make our interface easily understandable and accessible to them. Our art style is inspired by old cutesy DS games that were done in a pixel art style and utilized it in My Pocket Place so that our users don't become too visually overwhelmed. To make everyone feel included, we chose a pastel, gender-neutral color scheme and a dyslexia-friendly font so that no one will feel left out of our safe space. We also made sure that kids would be able to easily identify which objects they could interact with in their room by making their outlines a different color, and having that color change when they are hovered over or pressed. Lastly, to ensure that the kids felt safe and comfortable with Oba-Bear, we based the design on cuddly characters that kids already know and love, such as Totoro. Here are some examples of how our design evolved to what it is today. First, we started with a rough sketch, then elevated this into our initial design, which we eventually refined into the current versions that are in our game today.
I will now give a walkthrough for first-time users of our app, My Pocket Place. When you first enter, you'll be greeted by Oba-Bear and asked for your name. For the purpose of the walkthrough, I will enter demo mode. Next, you'll be asked how you feel. This will pop up every time you enter the app. Each button leads to an emotion intensity and confirmation screen. After you select your emotion, you will enter the room. The emotion that you just selected will appear in the top right corner. The weather is also dependent on the emotion. So if I were to go back and change the emotion, the weather will also change. As for the room, let's start with the bottom taskbar. Here we have Oba-Bear saying an encouraging message. Next, we have a calendar icon, which will store all of your previous emotions. From time to time, you will receive a letter from Oba-Bear. All of your previous letters can be found in the mail icon. And lastly, there's a music button, which will toggle the in-game soundtrack. As for the items in the room, let's start with the games. Here we have a dress-up game where you can accessorize Obabear. Next, we have a building blocks game. Both of these games use a drag and drop interface. Then we have a bulletin board with sticky notes. Here you can write reminders or just anything fun, and whatever you write will be saved. Next, we have a journal, where you can write about your day. Again, the journal entries will be saved. And finally, there's an easel, for you to just draw whatever you want. And that concludes the walkthrough.
Though we knew for ourselves that we had an amazing design, we needed a way to measure our success with the people who will be actually using our app. We had a total of 11 participants who helped us test out our app. We conducted cognitive, heuristic, retrospective, and think aloud evaluations with experts and potential users who gave us great feedback. Collectively, our testers reported that they loved the art style and Obabear, and the most popular features were the dress-up game, art activity, and the letter. Our users had lots of fun dressing up Obabear and drawing fun pictures in the app. When they read their letters, there were lots of smiles, giggles, and silliness from excitement. Some features that were commonly requested from our evaluators were more interactions with Obabear and additional mini-games to play in their room. Overall, we found My Pocket Place to be a huge success, as 100% of all testers said they would use the app again and gave the app an average score of 9.28 stars out of 10. In fact, some of our testers loved the game so much that there were some very grumpy faces when our session ended. However, this was easily fixed with some candy canes and jelly beans.
And we just still did have some bumps in the road, but then again, who doesn't? The first challenge that we faced was changing platforms from trying to create our game in Unity to ending up making it in Adobe Animate. And this did slow our process down a little bit at the beginning, but at the end of the day, it was the right choice to make. And the second challenge that we faced was that we didn't have any libraries to import from, so we had to make all of our assets and code all of them from scratch. And the next, it was like a smaller struggle that we faced, was that we weren't able to use GitHub with Adobe Animate, so we decided to use Google Drive instead and upload all of the assets individually, and also like upload the full version of the game for version control. And the last challenge that we faced was like scheduling meeting times, because like people were in different time zones and also remote learning again. And yeah. We got some feedback from our users in our last milestone, and some of the features that we wanted to add in our future prototype is having more personalized features and interactivity from the Obabear to make it feel less artificial, like adding chat with the Obabear. Like the user can like have a conversation with Obabear, along with having custom messages based off of what the user's been doing, custom letters based off of what the user's like mood has been lately, and along with customizable features such as educational mini games like in the backyard. And the last two features that we wanted to add were like having a radio where you can change the station, and also having some room customization where you can like put posters, paintings, and messages up on your wall. And yeah, that's it.